Well, we approach the holiday break, and the one and only Phil Steele of PhilSteele.com joins us. Phil, of course, has got his bowl projections prominently featured on his website, PhilSteele.com. Now, the magazines, of course, are the 2012 college football preview, and we'll show you the pro football preview in a few minutes. But, you know, it is still worth your while to get this publication, as I've emphasized the last couple of weeks when we've had Phil on the show. Not so much, you know, it's the end of the season, but for reference material, looking ahead to next season before his next publication comes out. And when that being said, Phil, I would venture to say, you know, the name of the show is All Bets Are Off, but if indeed I am, if I was still wagering, I would bet you're already working on your college football preview for next season.
Oh, you'd be right on the money, Bruce. And what I do this time of year is I read through all the stuff that was written about the team through the entire year, and I'm already on team number 40 for next year, right in the quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and special teams. So you're right on the money there, Bruce.
I kind of figured that, but obviously with all these bowl games, they will. I'm guessing they will have a bearing on some of your opinions.
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, you know, players coming out for the draft will affect them, but I get the first right through done on those positions. Get all the pertinent information in, find out what's gone on in the last 3 months. I get all the latest info. I'll rewrite the position a little bit. For the majority, though, those positions are at least done as far as at the end of the regular season.
Yeah, and so many teams who aren't participating in bowls, you can do your due diligence there. All right, let's recap a couple of games that have already been played. The Gildan, New Mexico Bowl in Albuquerque, Arizona and Nevada. Boy, were you on target with the over in this game. 49-48, Arizona prevailing.
Yeah, and it was a game where, you know, at the start of the game, Arizona trailed 21-0. On the sidelines, 2 of their defensive players get into a fisticuffs, and both end up leaving the game not to return, and things didn't look well at the beginning, and actually things didn't look well at the end. Now, Arizona did rally to within 24-21 at the half. At the half, Nevada had a 417 to 309-yard edge, but with just a minute and 48 seconds left, Nevada got a field goal to go up 48-35. Arizona drives down the field, scores a touchdown with 46 seconds left, recovers the onside kick, goes down and scores. And Rich Rodriguez actually called it one of his best wins of his coaching career. Arizona pulls out the win in a thriller, and it was definitely high scoring. The two teams combined for about 1,300 yards offense.
So that's a victory for the Pac-12, as we'll be keeping track of all the conferences. Can I assume, as we start playing these bowl games, your prediction is the Southeastern Conference will wind up with the best record?
Yeah, you would have to think so. They're actually favored in every single one of their bowl games this year. I don't think they're going to win every single one of their bowl games, but I think they'll finish with the best record. Now, one of the minor conferences may end up with a 3-0 or record, something like that. But as far as the big boys go, yeah, I think the SEC will have the best record.
All right, next one that's already been played is the very, very famous Idaho Potato Bowl in Boise, Idaho. It was a spud, all right. Toledo, I was disappointed in Toledo in this game. Utah State laid it on them 41-15, and this Utah State coach early in the year impressed Barry Alvarez so much he got the job in Madison.
Yeah, and Utah State, when you look at what they did this year, their only 2 losses. Both came when they missed a field goal at the end of the game. One came against Wisconsin, one came against BYU, or they could easily have been unbeaten this year. Now, this game, could easily have worked out a lot better for Toledo. They had numerous things go wrong. And believe it or not, with 7 minutes and 28 seconds to go in the game, Toledo only trailed 13-9, yet they were on the short end of a 41-15 score. Here's what went wrong for Toledo. During the game, they had 5 drives inside the red zone, inside the 20-yard line. They settled for 3 field goals. They threw an interception at the 2, and on 4th and 1, they got stopped at the 9. So that's 5 drives inside the 20 for 9 points. During practice, it seemed like the quarterback, Owens, would be okay for the game. He was definitely hobbled a lot more than was led on. And in fact, he didn't come into the game until late. 6-17 passing for 30 yards. Defensive player is Dan Moles. In fact, he led the nation in tackles this year. Opening kickoff of the game, he suffers a concussion and doesn't come in. Leading tackler in the entire country out for the game without playing a defensive snap. And then their top running back, Fluellen, who was questionable coming in, only got 5 carries, about 16 yards, didn't play the rest of the game. So without their top quarterback, top tackler, top running back, blowing 5 opportunities in the red zone, and then at the end of the game, Kerwin Williams just went off, the running back for Utah State. He had 53 yards in the first 3 quarters. He had 182 yards on his final 6 carries, and that game turned into a blowout.
How do you think this coach will do at Madison?
I think he's going to do well. Now, he stepped into a decent situation at Utah State. The coach prior to him at Utah State had took the team from a beleaguered program into one that was ready to get there. But I thought Anderson did a great job developing talent. He worked at Utah. And at Wisconsin, he steps into a pretty good situation. The bulk of the team is coming back next year. I think Wisconsin will be a contender in a division in his first year.
Yeah, and you got to trust in Barry Alvarez. He was such a great big game coach. Paterno was a great big game coach too, Phil, but Alvarez always had the Badgers ready when it came to bowl games.
Yeah, and we'll be talking about their big matchup in the Rose Bowl, and I think the fact that Barry Alvarez is actually patrolling the sidelines, it's good to see again, and he usually won his Rose Bowls when he went out there.
Yes, he did. All right, let's get to some of the games now, starting with New Year's Eve, and this is the Music City Bowl I want to ask you about, with a Southeastern Conference representative, namely Vanderbilt. As Phil already indicated, all of the Southeast Conference teams are favorite in their bowl games. They're about a touchdown favorite against NC State. Now, NC State's claim to fame this year is a game I watched in which they upset Florida State. At the time, Florida State was undefeated, but you got to give that quarterback of NC State a lot of credit. That never say die attitude. That was a thrilling game, and obviously NC State, I don't think as a result of that, they've already proven they can beat a big boy. So not that Vanderbilt was one of the big boys in the Southeastern Conference, but I would think you got to give NC State a shot here, or no?
Yeah, I think they have a shot, clearly. Even though it's an SEC-ACC matchup, you look at the fact that Vanderbilt won their last 6 games this year, and in those 6 games allowed under 310 yards 5 of the 6 times. And Mike Glennon, the quarterback for NC State, is an NFL-caliber guy. He's 6'6", strong arm. He's got everything you look for in an NFL quarterback. Now, like we did last week, we're going to go over the checklist. And as you can see by the checklist, I rate the offenses basically even. I give Vanderbilt an edge there at the running back spot with Zach Stacy. I give NC State the edge at the quarterback spot with Mike Glennon. Wide receivers and offensive line even. Now, Vanderbilt clearly rates the edge defensively. If you see on the checklist here, I think NC State's got the edge on the defensive line, but the back 7 goes to Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt has my number 23 defense, NC State number 61. The biggest edges for Vanderbilt go here. Special teams. I give them a large edge there. They have my number 19 rated special teams, NC State number 121. Coaching. NC State fired their head coach, Tom O'Brien. They have an interim head coach. Franklin, I think, is doing a phenomenal job at Vanderbilt. Turf and crowd, this game's basically played 10 minutes away from Vanderbilt's home field. It's going to be like a home game for Vanderbilt. And then how about the schedule rates even, but when you add up all the checklists, I have Vanderbilt by about 8.5 checks, or about 8.5 points in this game. So I'll call for Vandy to win by 7-10. But I think the best play here might just be the under. NC State's defense was banged up during the year, played better down the stretch. Vandy's defense has been playing good all year. I think the total in Vegas is 51.5, and I've got the under in that one.
Okay, next let's talk about the Liberty Bowl, which features Tulsa and Iowa State. An early line coming out of this one was a pick'em game. Obviously, Iowa State out of what used to be the Big 12, and Tulsa, a pick'em. The over-under in this one is 50, so comment on both of these situations.
All right. Well, it's interesting, and this is one of the few bowl rematches that we have this year. These two teams actually met in the opener. Tulsa was a slight favorite. They were a 2-point favorite at Iowa State. Iowa State won the game at home 38-23. They had a 441 to 358 yard edge. So they're playing a little bit of the disrespect card. It opened up where Tulsa was originally the dog. Iowa State players caught wind of it and said, hey, we're an underdog the first game of the year. We're an underdog now, and they're playing that card. Now, if you play the game on paper and look at the stats, Tulsa on the season outgained their foes by 107 yards per game. Iowa State was outgained by 73 yards per game. So on paper, clear edge to Tulsa. But as we look on the checklist here, you see that I do give Tulsa the edge on offense and on defense. In fact, they've got my number 32 rated defense, Iowa State number 49. But the largest edges for Iowa State, one is in special teams. They've got my number 22 special teams. Tulsa comes in at number 97. And then how about the schedule? Iowa State's actually taken on the 9th toughest schedule in the country. Tulsa comes in at number 106. So there might be a reason Iowa State's being outgained and Tulsa's outgaining their teams. I think these teams are remarkably tough to call. I do rate the game a toss-up, just like Las Vegas does. So I'm going to lean with the over in this game. That first matchup they played totaled 61 points. I could see something similar to that this time. And as far as the side goes, I do rate this one a pure toss-up. So to me, the over is the best play here.
And this intricate breakdown that Phil is featuring here with us on the show is what you can diagnose when you go to his website, philsteele.com, in his 2012 and, of course, going into the 2013 early bowl games here as we are entering the holiday season. All right, the next one is, and let's go to New Year's Day and start talking about the New Year's Day games. And the first one is the Ticket City Bowl game with Oklahoma State and Purdue. Big 12 versus Big 10. Purdue, an early line on this one was Oklahoma State by 17. I think we said last week Michigan State better win their bowl game. Maybe be the only Big 10 team that can.
That's right. And, all the Big Ten teams are underdogs, but Purdue's the biggest underdog of the bunch at practically 17 points for this game. And, they played better down the stretch. Once Marv became the starter, Purdue averaged 482 yards per game over their last 3 games of the season. But Oklahoma State is playing in Dallas. It's a recruiting territory for them. And of their 7 wins this year, 6 of them have been by 21-plus points. So when they get a chance to step on an opponent, they do. As we see by the checklist, I have a large edge on offense here to Oklahoma State. They've got the edge at quarterback, running back, receiver, and on offensive line. I rate them the number 6 offense, Purdue number 60. Defensively, I rate the two teams fairly close. I do give an edge to Oklahoma State up front and at the linebacker spot, but the edges aren't huge. They have my number 39 defensive line, and Purdue comes in at number 70. Special teams, edge goes to Oklahoma State. The big coaching edge here, Purdue with an interim head coach. Oklahoma State, of course, has Mike Gundy, who's gone to his 7th straight bowl game. And schedule goes to Oklahoma State as well, number 18 against number 53. Since Marv took over, Purdue's been scoring more points. Oklahoma State always scores points, so I would lean with the over in this game. But I'm also going to lean with Oklahoma State to put it on Purdue in this one. So not a good matchup for the Big Ten. I think Oklahoma State, which has 5 or 6 of their 7 wins by 21-plus points, gets number 7 this year and wins this one by 3 touchdowns.
That over-under is somewhere around 70, isn't it, Phil?
Yeah, it's 70 right on the button, and I would lean with the over. I think this will be one of those higher-scoring games. Even though it's New Year's Day, it's not your typical New Year's Day bowl where there's a lot of pressure on the game. The fact that it's a sort of a non-marquee New Year's Day game would still to lean towards the over.
This next one, the Gator Bowl, I beg your pardon, the TaxSlayer.com Gator Bowl, I beg your pardon. It used to be Pardon me, Phil. It used to be the most prestigious non-New Year's Day bowl game. Did it not? I mean, wouldn't you say it was right up there?
Yes. Yes, it absolutely was. And you had your New Year's Day, your Sugar Rose Orange, and I don't even know if the Fiesta was around that, but yes, the Gator was the next biggest one out there.
And this year, it pits Southeastern Conference against Big Ten. Let's pray that Northwestern won't embarrass the Big Ten in this one. And the odds makers in Las Vegas don't think that they will be embarrassed because they opened up with a line of, I think, 2 in favor of Mississippi State with an over-under of 52. How do you see it?
You know, this is one where I think the Big Ten gets a win over the SEC, and there's a couple of reasons why. When you look at this one, first of all, Mississippi State is a team that comes in playing a very similar Mississippi in the season final. Mississippi runs a similar style offense, similar style defense, and they beat Mississippi State pretty good. Also, talking to Coach Fitzgerald throughout the years and watching them pre-bowl practice last year, this Northwestern team and Coach Fitzgerald desperately wants to win a bowl game. Last year he was carrying around a monkey the entire bowl practices saying, we need to get this monkey off our back, we need to win. Well, Northwestern hasn't had that success because they've been pretty much a double-digit underdog in every bowl they're playing. Here they finally match up pretty well talent-wise. And as you look at the checklist that we put up here, we see that the teams are very close. Offensively, slight edge to Northwestern at running back with Venrick Mark there. He's an All-American that averaged 6.2 yards per carry. All-American, all-purpose guy. Mississippi State rates the edge at receiver. Northwestern the edge at the offensive line. Overall, I rate Northwestern number 38 offense. Mississippi State number 43. Defensively, I give a slight edge up front to Northwestern, an edge in the secondary to Mississippi State. Mississippi State is my number 38 defense. Northwestern number 54. Special teams, once again, dead even. Number 26, number 32. And if you look at this checklist, it's one of the few checklists where there's not a lot of check marks on either side. So there's not a lot of edges in the game. But I think the fact that Northwestern wants to get that monkey off his back, I don't think Coach Fitzgerald goes 5 minutes without thinking about it. I think he gets his monkey off his back this year. He's finally got a bowl game he can win, gets it done. I like Northwestern in this one. And for the total, it's 52. I would lean with the over. I think Northwestern's unique style of offense where they'll throw anything at you will have some success, and I think they score over the 52.
Considering the academic requirements at Northwestern, Fitzgerald's done a good job. Also, I want you to comment on Mississippi State. They started off this season very impressively undefeated, but I remember talking to you back then, and you pointed out very astutely they hadn't really played any of the big boys yet.
Yeah, and I mentioned in the magazine at the start of the year that Mississippi State had a great shot at opening up 7-0 due to the schedule, and then the schedule got a lot tougher. So I think they actually lost a game or two more than I expected them to lose this year. I was a little disappointed in Mississippi State. I thought they were a team that could easily have had 8 or 9 wins.
The one and only Phil Steele, philsteele.com, with his bold projections in detail. Intricate bold projections here for the remainder of 2012 and all of these big bowl games coming up in the early portion of 2013. We continue with Phil, but without any further ado, I can't figure out your tide today. You're going to have to reveal.
Well, it's Christmas time, Bruce, so you have to have Santa and the reindeer involved, and naturally I only wear football ties, so there's a reindeer playing football and then Santa Claus playing football down there. So it ties the two together, showing I'm in the Christmas spirit, but of course keeping that tradition of always having a football tie on.
All I can say is, Phil, you're very festive.
That's me, Mr. Festive.
Mr. Festive. All right, let's resume with these January 1st bowl games. The first one I want to ask you about here is the Outback Bowl. Now, this has traditionally been a Southeastern Conference opponent to the Big Ten, and this year it's South Carolina with Steve Spurrier against Hoke and the Wolverines of Michigan. Now, Michigan, did they not just suspend some kids for this big game? And South Carolina, I know, originally was a 5-point favorite, over under somewhere around 57. Has this line changed because of these suspensions?
No, the line has not moved due to the suspensions. What Michigan did was 3 players. One was a backup. One is their punter, which could be important. And another one is one of their top defensive backs. But what we find in the bowl season is a lot of times teams do suffer some suspensions. So it's just one of those things. I think Michigan will be able to overcome those particular matchup problems that they have. Now, in this game, SEC versus Big Ten, these two teams are very similar in this respect. They both have played 2 quarterbacks, and if you look at both teams, they're both missing their starting running back for the game. Lattimore out for South Carolina, Fitzgerald Toussaint out for Michigan. As we go to the checklist, we see that on offense, I give Michigan some of the edges there. At the edge of quarterback, I'm going to take Denard Robinson over Connor Shaw. At running back, with Denard Robinson playing some running back as well, I gave him a slight edge there. At the receiver spot, Michigan, and offensive line, Michigan. Overall, number 37 offense, South Carolina comes in at number 59. Defensively, Michigan's got a good defense. They only gave up 313 yards per game this year, but South Carolina's got one of the best defenses in the country. In fact, their defensive line, linebackers, DBs, rate the edge across the board. You might even bump up that defensive backs to 2 with Michigan missing one of their top 2 DBs. Special teams even. Schedule goes to South Carolina. Add it all up, the checklist, surprisingly, only has South Carolina winning this by about 3 points. So I would lean a little bit with the underdog, but I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. Both teams without their starting running back, neither getting a lot of great production from the from the quarterback spot. And it's interesting, and the reason that you would think Michigan could play in this game, look at their losses this year. 3 of their losses have been to the top 5 teams in the country, including Alabama and Notre Dame, and both of those were on the road, and those 2 teams playing for the national title. That's why I think they might be able to stay with South Carolina in a lower-scoring game.
Yeah, and South Carolina, the kids, and Spurrier too. He would never admit it, knowing his ego. But this was a season for them, Phil. They're going to look back at this and say, what could have been.
Yeah, and they played one of the toughest 3 games in a row of any team in the country. They had a huge home game against Georgia, which they played very well in. Dominated Georgia, as a matter of fact. But then coming into an emotional letdown the next week, they took on LSU on the road in Death Valley and came up short, and then got pushed for a 3rd straight week, having to travel to the Swamp and face Florida. It's one of the reasons that I had South Carolina pick 3rd in the SEC East this year was their schedule, and as it turns out, they lost both those key games in 3rd in the East.
All right, let's move on. And the next one is the Capital One Bowl, which is another one of these bowls that always features the Southeastern Conference against the Big Ten. And this is a great matchup. It's Georgia, who lost the Southeastern Conference championship game to Alabama, against Nebraska, who lost the Big Ten championship game to Wisconsin. Now, the opening line was somewhere around 10. The over-under here is 58, but there's a couple of factors to look at. I guess Georgia's a healthy favorite because they finished second to Alabama. That doesn't necessarily mean that they were the second best team in the Southeastern Conference because it's just so loaded. But are they going to have a little bit of a letdown? That's one question for you, because how do they get themselves up for this game after what really could have been for them? And then on the Nebraska side, they were so annihilated, Pelini and company, by Wisconsin. What an embarrassment indeed. I know they're not happy in Lincoln about that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the 2 teams come into this off completely different games. As you mentioned, Nebraska humiliated by Wisconsin, losing that game 70-31. Georgia, meanwhile, I think earned a lot of people's respect for that game against Alabama. They came within 1 yard of playing for the national title. So I agree with you. I think emotionally the advantage goes to Nebraska. They're going to be trying to get that bad taste out of their mouth, and Georgia might just be thinking whimsically about what it would have been like to play in the national title game, and they came very, very close to it. Now, the surprising thing to me when we look at this checklist is how close the 2 teams are on offense and defense. In fact, on offense, I would rate Taylor Martinez and Aaron Murray even. Martinez, not as accurate a passer as Murray, but he is more mobile. Running backs, you're talking about Amir Abdullah and Rex Burkhead for Nebraska against Gershel, Todd Gurley, and Keith Marshall for Georgia. Once again, dead even. The only edge on offense, a little bit of an edge at wide receiver to Georgia. And defensively, Nebraska actually has an underrated D. I give the defensive lines even. You look at the line. Definitely goes to Georgia there with Jarvis Jones. But Nebraska's had better pass defense. They're number 9 in my pass D rankings, and Georgia is number 48. Special teams, large edge to Georgia here, number 24 to number 92. Coaching edge, I'll give it to Rick. He's been in bigger games and done very well in the bowls. Schedule-wise, pretty even. Add it all up. Once again, I'm surprised the checklist only has Georgia coming in by 3.5 checks. So I would lean with the double-digit underdog out to atone for that embarrassing final regular season game. As far as the total goes, once again, this is a January 1 game. It's important to both teams. You have two good defenses. Georgia's number 12, Nebraska's number 36. I'm going to lean with the under in this game.
Interesting indeed. And, off the top of my head, I don't know this. Maybe you do. These are two very storied schools as far as football tradition. They've both won national championships. In the case of Osborne and Devaney before him at Nebraska, they've won a few. Have they ever met? I mean, to meet, these are two historical football powerhouses. When you look at them, I don't recall them meeting. Maybe they have.
This is the first meeting since the 1969 Sun Bowl, which was a 45-6 win. And remember, back in 1969, even the Sun Bowl was a good bowl because you only had a handful of bowls out there. But 1969 was their last meeting. I don't recall much about that game, though, Bruce, believe it or not.
All right, let's move on to the Rose Bowl, the granddaddy of them all. Shaw, of course, has just re-upped with Stanford. There were all kinds of rumors that he would be going and taking one of these many vacancies that will be occurring at the end of this NFL season, but he's going to stay at Stanford. Did a real good job with them after Harbaugh, of course, has departed and gone to the San Francisco 49ers, where he's excelling, obviously. On the other hand, you have Wisconsin, which was actually an embarrassment to have a team like Wisconsin in the Rose Bowl, in the Big Ten Championship. Let's start there with 5 losses. However, what they did to Nebraska in total annihilation, I guess, atones for it. But Wisconsin has represented the Big Ten the last couple of years. They've lost. One was to TCU. I thought they should have won that game. I blame Bielema's coaching in the second half, particularly for that loss. This is a good matchup, even though it may not look that way to the casual college football fan because of those 5 losses. But I got a hunch that Wisconsin is going to give Stanford all they won in this game, and I believe the early line was something like a touchdown in favor of Stanford, over under 47, Phil.
Yeah, the thing about Wisconsin, they do have 5 losses, but I always stress that if you lose a game by 6 points or less, you're basically 1 play away from actually winning the game. So this is a Wisconsin team that's 5 plays away from being undefeated this year. Their biggest loss in regulation was by 3 points. That came at Oregon State earlier this year. They also lost at Nebraska by 3 points on the road. Overtime was their other 3 losses. They lost in overtime to Michigan State. They lost to Ohio State in overtime. They lost to Penn State in overtime. And there, picking on Bielema a little bit, I think he should have gone for 2 at the end of the game. They had the Big Ten title game on deck. They score a touchdown, and they're down by 1. Why not go for 2 and end the game so you can get ready for the Big Ten title game? And instead he goes for 1 and sends it to overtime and loses it there. So in regulation, they only have 2 losses, and they were both by 3 points. So much better than their 5-loss record would indicate. Stanford, of course, one of the better teams in the country. Very impressed with the way they shut down that Oregon offense. Very impressed with the way they shut down USC. They had a fine season this year, of course, knocked off UCLA in the Pac-12 title game. And as we go to the checklist, we see that Stanford rates the edge at quarterback. I'll take Kevin Hogan over whoever Wisconsin brings up, and it is Kurt Phillips, the oft-injured senior, that has taken over there. Running backs, I'm going to give the edge to Wisconsin. Monty Ball, James White, Melvin Gordon. Stanford's got a pretty good one themselves in Stephen Taylor, but Wisconsin's got 3 good ones. Give them the edge there. Offensive line, once again, it goes to Wisconsin. They actually average 5.2 yards per carry. Stanford just 4.4. Now, defensively, all 3 areas, the edge goes to Stanford. In fact, they have my number 4 defense. Wisconsin has a good defense at number 14, but there's not many defenses in the country better than Stanford. Special teams, once again, the edge goes to Stanford, number 56 to 103. Stanford leads the country with 56 sacks, and I like the way they match up here against Wisconsin and the fact that Wisconsin likes to run the ball. Stanford's one of the best in the country at shutting down the run. Schedule also goes to Stanford, number 8 versus number 50. Checklist says Stanford by about 5. I think Wisconsin can hang with them here. I do believe it'll be a lower scoring game. We've got 2 of the top 15 defenses in the country, 2 teams that like to run the football. So I like the under, and I'm going to go with the underdog Badgers. And here's one more interesting stat. These 2 teams combined this year have had 15 games decided by 7 points or less. So they're involved in a lot of close games. Expect another one here and take the 7 points with the Badgers.
Gave the coaching edge to Shaw over Alvarez because Alvarez is rusty and obviously hasn't worked every day with this group and hasn't coached in a long time.
That would be the main reason, right? Alvarez, that's 7 years, I believe, since he last coached a game, so it might be a little bit on the rusty side. And you have to tip your hat to Coach Shaw, doing a tremendous job at Stanford.
The other thing, Stanford has played a tougher schedule. Notre Dame, they played tough in South Bend, Phil.
That's right, and then to play USC, Oregon, they have played a lot of good teams this year and done well against them.
All right, the next game is the Orange Bowl on New Year's Day night down in Miami, and it'll have Florida State, a big 2-touchdown favorite, the champions of the ACC. Here's another team you could say what could have been, and you really have to think that about them. I know they were one of your picks to make it to the national championship, and I certainly can see why after seeing them play several times this year. I can certainly understand why they're this big of a favorite over the MAC champion, the Huskies of NIU. But gosh, if it wasn't for that North Carolina State loss, who's to say that they wouldn't have beaten Florida, been undefeated, and been in a position to play for the national championship? And then again, Northern Illinois, high-flying MAC offensive team that's got nothing to lose. I'm real curious to hear what you say about this one. The over-under is 58. I got a hunch you're going to predict the over, but what do I know?
Yeah, and this is interesting. You mentioned Florida State. How interesting it would have been for Florida State had they had Brandon Jennings, their All-American defensive end, who they lost over the summer, their All-American cornerback, Greg Reed, who they lost over the summer, both after my magazine came out, and then, of course, their running back, Chris Thompson, who was lighting the world on fire at running back. He got injured and was out for the season about mid-year. Those 3 players on the team had been there. I think they would have beaten Florida, and they gave up 5 fourth-down conversions in the second half. They totally dominated NC State in the first half, leading 16-0, and just gave up that final 4th-down conversion at the end, which gave up the loss. So could have easily been a much different season. And I think when you look at these 2 teams talent-wise, if we look at the checklist now, this is the one that's got the most check marks for any bowl out there. I've got Florida State by 20.5 check marks. Go to any position. The only one I give an edge to Northern Illinois is quarterback. I think Jordan Lynch did a phenomenal job at Northern Illinois this year. Deserved to be one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the country. Manuel may have underachieved a little bit. Still had fantastic stats. But I'll take Lynch every other category. Offensive line, defensive line, linebacker, DB, coaching, turf, crowd, the games played in Florida, matchups, special teams. Special teams is even. There's an edge for Northern Illinois. And then, of course, the schedule, number 68 versus 124. And look at how Northern Illinois fared against BCS teams this year. They took on 2 of them. They took on Iowa, a team from the Big Ten that didn't even make a bowl. They lost to them on the road by a point. And they took on Kansas. Kansas was the only Big 12 team that didn't make a bowl game this year. Northern Illinois trailed that game in the 4th quarter at home by 10 points. They rallied for a 7-point win. Those are two of the weakest BCS teams out there. Now they're taking on one of the best and most talented in Florida State. And I think Florida State has to look at the fact they're less than a 2-touchdown favorite in this one. Maybe that'll keep them motivated enough to come out and play. You look at the talent-wise top to bottom, and it's a 28 to 35-point win probably for Florida State. I like the Seminoles to actually show up here. Northern Illinois' advantage would be if Florida State plays its C game and they play their A-plus game. But I think Florida State's defensive front seven takes away Jordan Lynch, and then Northern Illinois struggles. And with that said, I lean with the under. I think Florida State gets out to a big lead, continues to shut down Northern Illinois, and the game goes under that 58.5 points. No need to score 48 or 52 points in this game, and I think Florida State's defense will show it's one of the best in the country.
So you're saying at the over-under being approximately 58 thereabouts, you're saying you don't anticipate Northern Illinois to score much, huh?
No, I think they could be held to about 10, 13 points in this game. So I like Florida State to win it by more than 3 touchdowns and keep the game under.
Yeah, well, they certainly have a motivation here to prove that they did have a national championship caliber talent team this year. So certainly it very easily could be a big rout as you're predicting. All right, one more. Let's go to January 2nd, and that's Wednesday, January 2nd, day after New Year's. It's the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans. Florida's a 2-touchdown favorite over Louisville, the Big East representative, the last of the Big East representatives in this BCS system, thank God. And Florida, of course, out of the Southeastern Conference, another team out of the prestigious Southeastern Conference of a what could have been type year. But over-under is only 45 in this one. I'm curious how you see it.
You know, it's interesting, Bruce. This morning I was doing a radio show in Pittsburgh, and the guy doing the show asked me if I'm going to miss the Big East. And generally, when you're doing a radio show in that team's market, you always try to say favorable things about it. And I basically said, the main thing I'm going to not miss is the Big East being involved in the BCS. So it's good that they're out of it. And no, I'm not going to miss the Big East whatsoever as far as football goes. Now, I'll tell you what, I was very impressed with Teddy Bridgewater in that final game of the season. Here's a game where he was very questionable coming in. Had a pair of injuries, and in fact didn't even play into the second quarter, hobbled around, didn't have his mobility, and yet led Louisville to the win over Rutgers on the road to get him to this bowl game. But beating Rutgers on the road and beating Florida are two different things, and I thought Florida was playing their best ball at the end of the year. Look at how they were the only team in the country that really moved the ball down the throat in Florida State, and that was in the season final. They ran the ball extremely well. And Florida had their problems earlier in the year. They played some weak offenses, and then their offense struggled. They knew that just don't turn the ball over. You're not going to score on our defense, and Florida also has excellent special teams. Now, if you look at the checklist here, I give Louisville the edge at quarterback. I give Florida the edge at running back, though. I think when you look at Gillislee, he's one of the best in the country. Meanwhile, Louisville lost their top running back earlier in the year, so they're struggling a little bit at that position. Wide receiver close, offensive line edge to Florida. Florida has my number 54 offense, Louisville number 57. Defensively, look at those check marks piling up for Florida. They have got NFL caliber athletes throughout the lineup. Meanwhile, Louisville, nothing that really pale in comparison. Louisville is my number 55 defense, Florida number 2. Special teams, large edge to Florida. Turf and crowd, this one's in Florida, large edge to Florida. And I think Florida will be able to take away Teddy Bridgewater in this. If you take away Teddy Bridgewater, Louisville doesn't really have an offense. Schedule, Florida played my number 4 schedule in the country. Louisville, my number 93 schedule. I said Florida State had the most amount of check marks. This one's number 2. Florida's by 19.5 check marks. I think they do show up motivated. They almost made it to the national title game, Bruce. Had Notre Dame slipped up, we'd be having an all-SEC national title game in Florida against Alabama, two teams that didn't play during the regular season. And I like the Florida Gators to win this one by more than the 2 touchdowns. And with their defense, I think it's going to be tough for Louisville to score. I would go towards the under in this one.
Interesting.
As I think Florida wins it comfortably, and Louisville will have trouble scoring.
Now, we have have covered all of the other bowl games leading up to these holiday bowls with Phil previously, and that's because of the holiday break. The next time we're going to be back on the air with Phil is actually 2 weeks from today. And when we return, we will talk about that Thursday, January 3rd matchup, the Fiesta Bowl, Oregon and Kansas State. That's going to be a great matchup, at least on paper it is. Also, the Cotton Bowl figures to be an interesting game between Texas A&M and Oklahoma. There's some other minor bowl games, and then there's the big one, Alabama and Notre Dame. So all of those college bowl games yet to be talked about with the one and only Phil Steele. Now listen, check out philsteele.com. You get these graphic, intricate breakdowns of every single bowl game here in the holiday season. And once again, collector's item, yes, but also reference material until the new college football preview magazine comes out.